Thank you so much for coming on to the show. Super excited to have you. Why don't we start with you, just giving us a quick background on who you are and maybe even like an elevator pitch on how you got into product.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me, Dallin. Really appreciate it. Um, quick background on me. I like to think that I'm a little bit unique in the sphere of product in that I've been in consumer product management for the entire length of my career. So it's about 12 years now in product. Most recently, I was at Shopify leading product within our Shop app. And Shop, if you haven't heard of, is Shopify's consumer arm. It's a marketplace that aggregates all the products sold by Shopify merchants in a single place. And most specifically, I led our engagement and conversion team, which, if you're familiar with sort of e-commerce parlance, that's everything middle to the bottom of the funnel. So like product details page, your favorites, notifications and email, cart, and checkout screen. Prior to that, I served as director of product and design for a portfolio of entertainment brands that I like to call the OGs of the internet because they've been around for a while. So if you've heard of TV Guide, Metacritic, GameSpot, GameFAQs, I led all these brands end to end. So that's the app, the websites, the backend services, and had a pretty large team of both PMs and designers to support me. 6 PMs, including a middle manager, 3 designers. So any of you like aspiring managers out there can have some context on that too. Prior to that, I held some other roles within what we called our broader portfolio, CNET Media Group. And that group of brands transcended my last 2 companies, Red Ventures and CBS. They basically acquired us from CBS as like a carve out. So could get into what it's like to be part of an acquisition as well. But yeah, because those entertainment brands I was talking about was part of this larger set of CNET Media Group brands. Prior to my time there, I was also a lead for a couple of different teams in a more like horizontal like platforms role. So the 2 teams I was responsible for was our native apps team, the native apps across all the brands under that umbrella, and then our membership and personalization team, which is everything around the user's identity. And then just sort of rounding out the experience, because at this point I'm way beyond the amount of time that an elevator would take to go up.
We're in a very tall elevator, and
Yeah,
like the elevator in my building, it's very slow. So there you go. This is perfect.
yeah, this is like New York skyscraper here. So,
Yep.
but yeah, I spent some time at a startup, an events marketplace called Soch. And I started out my career at Microsoft leading the music app on Windows Phone when it seemed like Windows Phone could still be a thing.
A Windows Phone. I don't even remember that existing.
Yeah, that's maybe your audience doesn't either, but yeah, I mean there was a time back in the early 2010, 2013 when sort of smartphones were just coming into dominance, where yeah, it seemed like Microsoft could still be a player. Windows Phone did some really cool things around their UX that ultimately like Android ended up copying in some of the material design they have. But it was an exciting time when mobile was just sort of coming to the forefront.
That's cool. I love that like our career paths have a lot of similarities. I've been in consumer product my entire career as well. And I've been specifically on mobile
Yeah,
almost my entire career as well. So I didn't even know that before you gave me that elevator pitch, even after
yeah,
looking at LinkedIn. But the one thing that I was very curious about immediately is you've worked for a lot of very cool, like big name brands,
yeah,
Microsoft, CVS, Red Ventures.
Yeah.
and most recently Shopify. I'm just curious what I'd love to, and we don't have to go into all of them, but maybe the ones that are more impactful. If you could tell me more about like the culture there or processes
Yeah.
and systems that you can get at some of these more established, well-known companies.
Yeah, totally. Um, so, and also like just for your audience sake, you put Red Ventures in that mix. The other ones totally agree everybody's heard of, but probably like not a lot of people have heard of Red Ventures. It's, and just so for some brief context there, it's the largest digital media company in the US and owns all of these other brands, even beyond the ones that I mentioned, including Healthline, Bankrate, Point Sky, Lonely Planet, and tons of others. And so you add all of those brands together, it's the largest digital media company in the U.S. Um, but yeah, it's definitely been interesting, and I would say like in terms of what it's like to work at these different companies, I would say there's kind of like there's broadly three buckets that you can think about in if you're working in technology. There's like big tech, people within that brand. Shopify's in there, Microsoft's in there. Um, then there is startups. So I've spent some time in startups, which I mentioned. But there's also this big set of companies that I like to call tech at non-tech. Um, and so CBS and Red Ventures are squarely in that bucket. And each of these companies and their cultures have like different pros and cons, depending on like what's most motivating for you. Big tech, you're going to command big salaries. If you're very young and junior in your career, I think many of your audience might be, it's a really great place to learn the fundamentals with a lot of different support. In contrast, startups, you're probably going to be paid less, like maybe a higher, like reward risk ratio or whatever. Like basically you could potentially make a lot of money in the edge case where the startup does really well, but more than likely you'll make less money, you'll have less support, but you're going to have a lot bigger impact and scope and autonomy. On the average, of course, every situation is a little bit unique. And I think that, if you're thinking of this as a spectrum, like tech at non-tech can be a nice in between those two. You'll often command a little bit higher salary than at a startup. Again, depends on the company. But you still may have like an opportunity to have more impact. So in my case specifically, relatively, early in my career, whatever, 2016 was 4 years into my career, something like that, 5 years into my career. I was responsible for a portfolio of apps that had meaningful traffic, right? Millions of monthly active users if you sort of added them all together. Multiple engineering teams that I mapped to, and also started having PMs report into me. That's uncommon. It happens, but it's uncommon. And I will be the first to admit that I was fortunate. I had really great management to support me and whatnot. But and we could talk about that in terms of navigating your career. But I think the fact that it was tech and non-tech companies like played into that. The big con to tech and non-tech companies, which I would say doesn't exist at the other two, is there are many instances where you sort of need to fight to justify your existence. And I don't just mean from an employment perspective or even a compensation perspective, but getting headcount is really, really difficult. Getting top tier talent can be difficult because people want to work at, big tech preferably. And also, like, depending again on the nature of the business, like you may find that product like isn't the foremost voice in determining like the business strategy, which I would say at like big tech companies, like it's kind of almost a given, right? I mean, it depends on the company. Some tend to be more engineering driven, but at a consumer tech company, more than like consumer like like proper big tech company, more than likely product is going to be determining strategy and the roadmap, not just for the product or for the business.
Yeah.
So, there's trade-offs basically.
Yeah, I love that. You hit on a few things, and I keep looking down. I'm taking notes over here because I love what you're saying, and I want to be able to remember. But the thing that stood out to me the most is product driven companies versus non-product driven companies, and what
Yeah.
that means to a product manager and somebody on the product team. Because that's one thing I took for granted. I founded my own startup, so obviously very product driven. And then I went to AccuWeather. Again, they had just like stepped into like a new chief product officer, built an entire product team. So they had transitioned to becoming product driven while I was there, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And then I've also been at roles where the company is just definitely not product driven,
Yeah.
and it's painful. Like especially like for at least for me, where I'm like, I love product, and you're on the product team, and you kind of can go from a company where it's like, not that this is good, but sometimes they think product is like royalty, and like product is
Yeah.
determining this, product is building this, product needs this. Like let's figure it out so that we can have a product driven org. And then if you're in like a marketing or sales driven organization, the product team gets a lot of whiplash, right? And they're kind
Yeah.
of the whipping boys in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. And yeah, and it's just like there's no right way to run a business.
Yeah.
But I guess as I think about it, it's just interesting to come in to know, hey, yeah, like we're a product driven organization. To me, that's more exciting. You get more say, you have a
Oh
larger
yeah.
impact in the company, in the direction of the company, like you were saying, than a sales or marketing driven organization.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, and that's what I think you're alluding to a lot when you say, hey, at some places it's like a fight to stay relevant and like
Yeah.
stay, like not only just get headcount and keep a job, but it's like it's just not how the business thinks. It's like
Yeah.
a different culture.
Exactly. I think you're exactly right. And that was actually the culture that we came into at CBS, where it was definitely again, CNET Media Group was part of CBS, but it was definitely like a sales and editorial driven product, like, or company. Like, you could argue that, for most of these brands, editorial is the product, and people are coming there to read the articles and watch the videos. And the business, like the product in terms of what was generating the money, was those eyeballs and the ad sales behind them. And to your point, like, I like your words like whipping boy. Like, yeah, like when we came in, product was essentially the whipping boy. Oh, sales needs you to do this, editorial needs you to do that, and you're just sort of like the go between what their requests are and engineering. And I would say, like, when I came in, I like really wanted to help change that, and luckily, like, our senior leadership, and like there were a couple of really great VPs of product, and then later, when I was reporting to our GMs, like they were all had the same vision around product, like being the voice that sort of brings all these disparate stakeholders together and formulates a coherent strategy. And so, we were making a lot of traction at CBS, a little bit less at Red Ventures, is part of the reason why I left. But I think that's critical. If you're a product manager looking to like have an outsized impact, joining a company that's truly like a product led company is I think the way to go,
Yeah.
especially for consumer tech.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you mentioned that last little piece because I would love to talk to you because I think we could probably nerd out, if you will, on consumer tech because that's what I love. And actually, not long ago, I did a B2B interview, and I just like bombed it. After 15
Yeah.
minutes, I just knew for sure I wasn't getting this role. Like
Yeah.
I hadn't taken into account like how different it is. I have had a
Yeah.
little B2B experience, but not much.
Yeah.
But consumer is definitely my bread and butter. But I'd love to hear what you like.
Yeah.
What you like consumer, and like kind of how you think about consumer products.
Yeah. And it's so interesting too, because like when I interviewed at Shopify, despite clearly work going to be working on a consumer product, Shopify does all of their interviewing, kind of like Google does, like generalist. And so I had a B2B interview, and I found it so difficult. I had to do a lot of preparation because, as you said, it's so difficult. And like I think it's so your question was like around consumer products specifically, but I think it's worth calling out like why somebody might choose to focus in on one or the other. There actually are pros and cons. A lot of people like find themselves like well suited to thinking about B2B, and of course now these days there's all sorts of like hybrid like companies, like Asana for instance is I would say B2C to B because or B2B to C because like it's a very very like UX focused company, and a lot of people use it. But I would say like the advantage of consumer tech, when what draws me to it, is really it's like products that I use and that I can directly have empathy for the user. And obviously, like you never want to fall into the mistake of like thinking that you are the only type of user and all of that stuff. But working on a product that I can use myself, it's it's just a lot more fun. And it's motivating for me to get up the day, and that's a big part of it. Um, for a lot of cases, though, you can argue that it depends on the business, right? But like a lot of times, B2B focused companies, they there's like a more like direct like there's more like a proper um, like value being created, if that makes any sense. Like again, I say this just because I worked on a lot of media properties, and it's hard to like see the immediate value you're creating for the world. But like if you take a look at a product like Shopify, and again, not the consumer app that I was working on, but the all the tools and whatnot they're building for entrepreneurs, they're really empowering entrepreneurship, and it's like it's a freaking awesome mission. So there's a lot of B2B companies like that. And I would also say like there's also a big difference too, especially in the beginning, like in the way that you approach um, product management. Consumer tech, especially when you get to a certain scale, despite you having that easier empathy for the user, ends up being like a very like quantitative driven approach, because there's so many people using your product. Most of your product insights are going to come from your analytics. Whereas B2B, it actually it's more important, I think, to have that direct relationship, do user research, talk to your customers. And again, this isn't to say if you're a consumer, you shouldn't talk to your customers, or if you're B2B, you shouldn't be looking at analytics. But as a broad theme, like hearing directly from your customers on the types of things you should be building to make your lives easier is going to be more important. And so if you enjoy that type of a work, B2B may actually be a better place for you. I had a brief stint building products for restaurant owners when I was at Soch. And I got to shadow a restaurant owner, and it was actually super interesting. It was the best customer interview I've ever done. Is I was learning about this entirely new space that I knew nothing about. And maybe this will seem obvious to you and some of your audience, but like I had no idea that there are completely separate queues for like 2 tops and 4 tops. I thought that like maybe like that if you were just 2, like why can't they just seat you at a 4-person table? But as it turns out, that's like just really suboptimal. So anyway, like all sorts of things like that, like might lend somebody to choose a B2B product.
So that sounds like the craziest user interview ever, which sounds very cool. What do you mean? Like you shadowed them? So like you spent like the day
Yeah.
with them, or what?
Yeah, a whole like dinner shift from like 5 to like 10 or something. I was just like kind of sitting in my little corner of the restaurant, like watching him, occasionally asking questions because he's like pretty busy, right? But like, or I might like ask the servers questions on like how they're making certain decisions. But yeah, it was super cool.
Yeah, that is very cool. Why don't we talk a little bit about user interviews and like how you think about them? So, like user interviews are, I think they're like crucial, right? Like looking at
Yeah.
data, like you have quantitative and qualitative. So this is like primarily on the qualitative side, like you sometimes send out surveys and you have your NPS score and all of that. But one thing that I think is interesting is just like having conversations with
Yeah.
customers, even when you're over an app do like with millions of users, which
Yeah.
both of us have experience doing that. It's still interesting to get in on that in the weeds level one-on-one with the customer. And I guess what is the role of user interviews from your perspective in product management?
Yeah. I think there's two ways to approach this. Um, so again, I'm gonna focus in consumer products specifically here. Um, I think there is talking to users to keep your like basically avoid being stuck in an ivory tower, which if you really are like a user like of your own product, it's a little bit harder to do that. But again, you could fall into the trap of thinking that you're a representative sample, which you may not be. So even just having a regular set of conversations with users, which by the way doesn't necessarily need to be a 30-minute to an hour like live one-on-one call. Like I used to engage, or my team used to engage with customers or users of our apps via app reviews, and we'd have email conversations, and occasionally we would develop a relationship with these people and jump on a call with them and whatnot. And having that regular cadence of dialogue with your user base is I think really critical to stay grounded and um, um, also like sometimes it's easy to get like it's easy to forget that your product is like, I mean, let's take the TV Guide app for a second. Like, you know, it's your like you're spending so much of your life thinking about this, this app or this service or whatever, and then you have to remind yourself when you're talking to customers like, okay, they're using this for like a couple of minutes a day to like figure out what to watch. Like this is not their whole like life spent in this app, and so just having that broader context, I think, is helpful. So that's like one thing, right? Like regular touch points with your user base, which may or may not result in like any meaningful insights, right?
Yeah.
And then there's user research that's like more targeted. Like you have a specific question you're trying to answer, and I would say that this like can be also be broken down um, into two types of questions. One is you have some level of uncertainty around a problem that you're trying to solve, and the other is an uncertainty around the type of solution that you have to a problem. So in the former, you would ask sort of more open-ended questions. Usually, you're trying to gauge a market, and you're trying to understand like more about the market, what proxies are using to solve this problem today, and whatnot. And when you have more uncertainty around the solution, you're going to do more like a UX type research, right? You're going to show them some prototypes or whatever and get their feedback on it. I think that the former is really, really valuable and important to do for startups. You may have a lot of hypotheses around the space, but here in a startup, like hopefully your solution is something that doesn't, or your ideas around solutions, like they don't even exist yet. So it's really important to understand the problem space very deeply. The second one is, and this may be a little bit controversial, but trying to gauge the get feedback, user research on solutions that you have. I actually think is way overused in product today. I think there's a lot of cases where people do user research, but frankly, it's just not really necessary. So I'll give you an example. Have you heard of Casey Winters? He was like Eventbrite CPO. Like he's a big product influencer anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know him super well, but
Yeah.
yes.
So he was on a project. He was on a podcast with Kenny. Wait. Shoot. Is it Kenny? Kenny's newsletter?
Yeah, the Kenny newsletter.
Yes. Yeah. So another
Yeah.
product guy, right?
Yep.
And he was talking about how his like one of the people on his team like wanted to do some user research. They're trying to think their user login and sign in flow and do some user research and figure out like who's what the best experience would be for that and whatnot. And his point was like, why do you need to like spend a week doing that? Like just look at like good examples on the internet and just like take the best examples and then build it and test it and whatever, like. So I think that, and that's just one example, but I think it's really a good idea, a good point, because there's all these instances where there's really great best practices already out there on the internet, and you don't need to waste time like trying to ideate a solution because you have high confidence. And I'll go specifically here, like, and talk about like my product. Like when we were completely re-envisioning TV Guide for the streaming era, right? This was a gigantic overhaul, right? We were like TV Guide. If you heard of TV Guide, or your user base, your listeners have heard of TV Guide, you probably think of the magazine or maybe the website, right? That helps you figure out what to watch on a particular channel at a particular time. And obviously the world's changed, and people are watching shows and movies on streaming services. So we were thinking of leading an initiative to totally rethink TV Guide to account for that, right? Help you figure out what to watch on streaming too. Gigantic change. We didn't do any user research on the experience, and this may be like mind-boggling to you, and like this, like you're completely changing the app and the website. And frankly, like if we had more resources, like we were a Google or like a Facebook, we probably would have used them. But I remember talking to my my manager, who is VP of EVP of product and design and whatnot across an even broader portfolio, and I was like, should we do user research here? Like, it seems like a really big change. And he's like, do you think you're doing anything that's like very risky from a UX perspective? I'm like, no, like we're taking like best practices. There's like carousels of shows and movies from like across the internet. Like people will be used to navigating this. Like there's a couple of things I have questions about, but we can do some tests after we release and whatnot. He's like, no, then don't spend a couple of weeks doing user research. Just start building it. And so like I think that's the like understanding. You've probably heard like one-way doors versus two-way doors, and whether or not solutions are like super risky, like new UX paradigms or not. Like I think those types of things are important to think through, and like you may not actually need to do user research before starting to build.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting, especially when I've spent a lot of time at startups at very, very early stage, and you don't have teams really or time to go do all of that.
Yeah.
And the thing that I always think about, which kind of jumping on your potentially controversial bandwagon, is there are companies that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars to figure out the best flow for each thing. These big
Yeah.
tech companies, they have so much money. They've done the user research. And
Exactly.
it's not like they're coming up with like the worst forgot password flow ever.
Yeah.
It's like they have the smoothest forgot password flow that exists, and they've tested thousands of different
Yeah.
types. And frankly, there could be like a product manager at Google that's like, well, maybe not anymore based on the economic state, but that's like literally over the forgot password flow. Like that's all
Exactly.
they do. And it's just like you can use that and you can work off of that for sure.
Exactly, and basically just like the biking analogy or car racing, and just like take their draft, right? Like
Yeah.
just like get in right behind them and copy what they're doing, and like just be shamed. Like, yeah, this is actually not a big controversial thing for PMs, but it can be for designers. Like just like shamelessly copying like best practices from other things. Like designers tend they want to be creative and do something different, which I totally get, but like, yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of instances where like, yeah, just take the best practice and move on.
Yeah. And you see apps, I don't know, I'm actually not a big Marriott user, but I had their app, and they started this new navigation that they have like this little circle in the bottom corner of their app. So you technically get more screen real estate for like
Yeah.
everything, but then like everything's on that button, like all the navigation. And it was
Yeah.
so weird and confusing. And even as like a mobile app product guy, I'm like, I want to like
Yeah.
get behind something new and like kind of pushing the boundaries. but it
Yeah.
just didn't work. And they, they reversed and they went back to a more traditional way. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like, that's great. Let Marriott, they're a huge brand, let them go explore with that button
Yeah.
and be
Yeah.
aware of it. And then it didn't work. And then watch it go back. And it's like, okay, we still have some best practices based on how people use their phones and phone screen
Yeah.
sizes and all of that right now. So kind of interesting. I was wanted to follow up with you on some skills and characteristics that you
Okay.
think are critical for product managers.
Yeah. So it's tough because even as we were just talking about the spectrum from B2B to B2C, like some of the skills that you'll use more frequently can be different. Um, so I'll try to give a fairly like generic answer, but I do worry that in its genericism it becomes less useful. But we can just try to dive into some specifics for each of these. Um, when I'm evaluating product managers, both in the context of interviewing or writing a performance review or whatnot, I have five primary attributes that I'm looking at. The first is around prioritization. If you really boil down a product manager's job, is to be prioritizing everything. Prioritize what to build, prioritize like requirements within a particular feature, prioritize bugs. Those ones are maybe more obvious and people know about them. But what you're also prioritizing is your team's time, and you're prioritizing your own time, right? Especially as you get more senior, there's going to be 1,001 things for you to be doing, and you need to be thinking about what's the highest leverage things for you to be doing. So somebody who is like constantly thinking about stack ranking literally every aspect of their work and their life, that's critical. And I expect like my product managers, like when I like if they come to me, hey, should I do this or that? My first question to them is to be like, what do you think we should do, this or that? And and so anyway, I think that's critical. Um, the second is around user empathy um, and user experience, right? This is so critical for consumer products, having that natural empathy, right? And should be you should view it as your mission as a PM to be increasing your intuition around what a great product is throughout your career or throughout your like duration at your job. And everything that you're doing around looking at analytics or doing user research or doing competitive analysis, all of those insights should be improving your product intuition. And even when you switch jobs or you switch industries, you can apply a lot of those learnings and intuition to shortcut things. Because the reality is, you can't test everything, and your intuition is a shortcut for testing. So that's the second one. And by the way, Dallin, stop me if you want to like dive deeper on any of these too.
No, I love it, and I just wanted to make sure we get all five out there, and then I
Yeah,
wanted to go back and kind of punch through them, at least a
yeah,
few of them.
yeah, for sure. Um, so the third one is around um, passion and drive. And again, like this this depends on your industry, but for most consumer products, like the stuff that we get to work on is like it's fucking cool. I hope I can say that on your podcast. I don't know what what type of podcast it is, but yeah, it's fucking cool. And if you're not excited about what your team is building, like are they going to be? And I think that like that inspiration is critical to motivate your team. I like to say as a PM, you're not really doing anything. You're just, inspiring others to do things for you. But it also means doing things that frankly really suck because you care about your customers and you care about your business and your product. To give one specific example here, when I was leading the CNET app, and we also redid the entire CNET app. We can get into like what it was and why if you're curious, but um, like most redesigns, people entirely hate it. And in this case, there was some unjustified reasons for the hate, but there were also a couple of justified reasons for the hate. And now this is going to seem crazy because people are going to be like, why couldn't I just use AI to do this? But AI was like, just a glint in open AIs at this time. But like I went through every single user review, replied to the user review, and aggregated like a theme from the user review, and then used that to inform like some of the features that we needed to do to bring up our app store. It was like the most mind-numbingly not just boring work, but like horrible work. Like we've been working on this thing for whatever 6 to 9 months, and then just to like read all the hate on it was horrible. But that's what the product needed. So that's what I mean by passion and drive.
Yeah.
And then the fourth one is fast learner. And so I look for somebody who can again apply some of their product intuitions in one sphere and apply it to another sphere and get that information really, really, really quickly. And this may be in skills development, but it may just be learning the business. And I think that somebody who learns really quickly is almost certainly going to be more successful than somebody who isn't, because there's no way when you come into a new role or a new job that you're going to know as much as the people who are already there. And then the last one is around leadership, which is, a super fuzzy word that probably is way overused. But it goes back a little bit to what we were talking about in passion and drive and inspiring the people around you to do their best work. And in the same way, also, we were talking about empathy for your users. I think leadership is about empathy for your team and trying to understand what specifically they are looking for to do their best work. It may be a process. It may be encouragement or praise. It may be like certain responsibilities that or type of work that they find more interesting, or avoiding work that they think is really annoying. But it is your job as a product manager to get the best work out of your team. And when I say your team, I mean every engineer you work with, every data person you work with, every designer you work with, maybe your stakeholders if they're so like that's your job, is to understand that your team in the same way it's your job to understand your users. So that's what I mean by leadership.
I love that. Okay, I'm just going to run through the 5 real quick, and then I want to dive into a few of them. But the first one was prioritization, user empathy and user experience, passion and drive, fast learner, and leadership.
Yep.
Which I don't know if you prepared that beforehand or if you're really just that good. But
So I'll tell you a secret, Alan. I'll tell you a secret. Anyone who sounds remotely articulate in any answer that they give to anything has thought about it before, and have probably gave that speech before, unless they're just some sort of a genius. But in this case, yes, I've thought about this before, and I've given this type of an answer before.
yeah, I'm like I love that, and I agree with everything on the list. And also regarding your question regarding freedom of speech, I'm very, freedom of speech. If you got to say words you want to say, you just go for it.
Cool.
But regarding prioritization, like that's the first one I want to dive into, because I like that you said that one first, because it's just like such a thing. Like there's people's brains, and maybe like if you're watching this, you notice like you always like know what projects to prioritize or what work to prioritize, or like what to prioritize in just like any category of life. And there's some people whose brains really just don't do that naturally. And
Yeah.
I do think it can be learned for sure. Like it's not like something miraculous that you're like born with or whatever, but it is so critical. And the funny thing is, I actually do this with my wife. We have a Trello board. We use like product management tools for our life. we have
Yeah. Oh God.
yeah, we have a Trello board and we do a scrum. We have a weekly scrum. Like I don't call
Yeah.
it a scrum, but every Sunday we get together and we have a
Yeah.
backlog and then we put like a bunch of things in a ready to do column and then we have a done column and every week we go through it and we
Yeah.
put it in like a priority order of like things we're working on together, like just like chores we need to get done, things she needs to do, things I need to do. And you know what? It's actually been amazing just in my like normal life of just like prioritize and it frees like the best part about prioritization, which I think people think about it a lot of times in work to accomplish and work to do. So, like time working, but nothing frees up time more than prioritizing. So, you're like,
Yeah.
this is what I'm doing this week. Like, that's it. And these are the most important tasks. So, like, you can feel great about your week, even though you know that you have a whole backlog of things that you're going to need to do still, but you'll do them, in another week
Yeah.
or so.
Yeah. So, Dallin, I do exactly the same thing. And in fact, I want to point your listeners to a talk I gave in product school a couple of years ago called How to PM Your Life. And it's literally this. Yeah, I think maybe we could throw a link in the description or something.
Yep.
Hopefully the video is still up there, but I need to write a blog post about it too. But yeah, it's literally this. And it came out of the same insights that you had, which is like, how am I so effective at like improving product and improving like getting things done at work, but like so shitty at it in my personal life? And I was like, oh well, one I have a process for, and the other I don't. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's crazy. I didn't even know you had a this talk, but we'll definitely add it in the description below because I mean, first of all, I want to listen to it, but it is true. Like the other thing is like I think this is kind of funny, but I think people who are naturally like lazy or naturally procrastinators, they're actually great at prioritization.
yeah,
Because it's kind of like, hey, like I don't want to do all this work. What do I have to do right now?
yeah,
Which I'm not saying that's a great PM characteristic or anything, but it kind of naturally makes you prioritize. Um, the other thing I wanted to talk about within the list of five is in regards to leadership, because as a product manager, there's kind of two paths. In the very beginning, right? Like you're a product manager and you're a leader of the team, but no one reports to you.
yeah,
And as you grow, you can just become more and more senior as a product manager and stay an individual contributor, which there's a lot of money in that.
yeah,
That's one other cool thing is like there's a great career path for people that don't want to manage other people.
yeah,
But there's also a great career path for people that want to manage other people, and you become kind of like what you do and become a leader of product managers. But kind of speaking to kind of earning the trust and being able to actually have the leadership capacity when you don't have people reporting to you. So it's not naturally like the developers feel like, hey, I have to do good work for Alex because if I don't, he won't let me go on holiday or he won't, give me a bonus
yeah,
or whatever. Like that has nothing to do with the PM. So you really have to be able to like give true leadership, which is like
yeah,
build trust, put in the hours, like know what you're doing and know what you're talking
yeah,
about. Uh, because these developers and these designers, they spend like it's much easier for a product manager to write up a quick PRD, like a products requirements document. You can do that in an afternoon or in a few
yeah,
hours and that can turn into weeks of work for a developer.
yeah,
So the developer like needs to know what you're talking about.
yeah,
You have a good plan and you're in it till the end with them.
yeah,
But what would you say is key in building that trust to be able to have that leadership role amongst a team of people that don't
yeah,
report to you? And frankly, if you're newer in your career, they might have been in their career for 5 to 10 years and worked with
yeah,
great product
yeah.
managers before. And now they're dealing with someone who is very
More
green and
junior.
trying to
Yeah,
figure things out.
yeah, yeah. It's tough, honestly. But it starts with um with the empathy that I was mentioning, right? Which is to say, like, get to know them personally, each individual personally. And the reality is each this goes, and by the way, there's a certain part of this which is just like the other four things, like, do your job well, like have a good plan, like prioritize things right, like have like good feature ideas and whatnot. But I'm talking about specifically around building trust in ways other than just doing a good job with the other four things. And it's really around trying to understand them individually, and also backing them up. You'll find that there will be certain moments can either be like really great trust building moments, or the opposite, trust breaking moments. So typically this might be something like your your team has built something, and then some executive comes in and says despite having reviewed it before, oh, actually, like it needs to be this other way, for X, Y, and Z reasons. This actually quite happened quite frequently at my last job at Shopify. Yeah, and having your team's back in this case, and not just sort of like rolling over, is typically a really big trust moment. Because again, like while each person is, has individually things that motivate them or demotivate them, like a pretty common universal theme is like building work that is, or doing work that isn't used as a demotivating factor. And it's hard because at the same time you want to please your manager, and your manager's the one writing reviews, and there's disproportionate focus on your success and your compensation and everything. But I think that having your teams back in this way is really critical. So that's just one example. But yeah, look for all these different ways in which you can build trust by understanding the individual factors that will help motivate or demotivate your team.
Yeah. And speaking of demotivators, because well, before I get there, that's just so true. As long as you feel like a team unit and you have each other's
Yeah.
backs, it goes a long way, because inevitably you're going to build something, especially if you're at a startup. Like, you build things, and by the time it's done, maybe the founder has changed their mind of what they want, or there's like a new direction they kind of want to, there's like a little pivot. And so there's a lot of that, of like, hey, this is kind of like unused, or it's not completely done, but you just have to like ship it,
Yeah.
based on like getting something out there, which is unfortunate. But you can kind of see where everyone's coming from, where it's like, okay, you can't like wait for the perfect product to be built, but also if you ship something too early, it might not be good enough, and so you might not get the analytics or the data that you're hoping to get out of what you thought you could deliver. But regarding the demotivator I was thinking of is the economy right now, and tech has like always been the cool thing, at least since I've been around in my career. Like, tech is the cool thing. Like, you want to work in tech. But the current environment in tech is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
I remember all the projections where it's like, hey, in like 2023, we're going to be short 30,000 or 10 million developers. Like, we need more developers. And now we're here and we're running into it. And it's like, product managers are getting let go in masses from even
Yeah.
like the big FANG companies of like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, and uh, and then developers who, I always thought, like, for sure developers are never getting let go as long as they like don't suck at their job.
Yeah.
And even if they are not very good yet, usually they're junior, and they get more experience, and they get much
Yeah.
better, and then they're like guaranteed jobs forever. And just with the current state, there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of layoffs,
Yeah.
and it's impacted. I know that it's kind of impacted both of us. What
Yeah.
what do you think about getting into tech right now? And also, how would you do it if you're kind of coming out of college
Yeah.
and you're like, look, the tech economy has to like bounce back.
Yeah.
Um, but how would you get in?
Yeah. So a couple of things here. No question that the trends that you called out are real. Um, I will say that for experienced professionals, product people, developers, and whatnot, with several years of experience, work at good companies, build products and whatnot, my perspective is most all of us are going to find another job. It may not pay as much if you're working at big tech. It might be tech and non-tech, as we were talking about, but they're going to find jobs. Um, who it really hurts is the audience of this podcast and who you're asking about, just people getting in. Because what happens is like if somebody can hire an experienced professional because there's the availability in the marketplace for that and they can do so at a reasonable cost, they would do that, right? They don't have to spend the year on on onboarding somebody and teaching them how to do product, as the case may be. Um, so I don't think that that is a reason to not get into technology. Um, I do believe that this is temporary, but it does maybe change the approach. Um, so, of course, if you can still get into big tech, like that's the way to go, right? You're gonna get the best experience that way in the beginning of your career, and you're going to have that brand name. But if that's not possible, like your next option is just get into tech anywhere, and maybe even an adjacent role if you're trying to be in product, like be a project manager or be an analyst or maybe a designer or engineer too. Of course, all those roles are in many ways also affected right now. So, but like my point is that like you being a little bit flexible in sort of how you get into tech. But the important thing at the end of the day is that you get some reps building products in one form or another on a team of people building a product. And if you're still not able to do that, what I tell a lot of college students who I speak with, they're looking to break into product, build products outside. Like you can build products without working at a like company, right? You can, play around with AI or work with a couple of your friends on the side to build something. And at the end of the day, like there will still like there will be some company eventually that will want to take advantage of those skills. I can tell you that, like, for instance, when I was at CBS, like our hiring strategy, like we couldn't afford to pay people what big tech was making. And the only way that I was able to get a headcount was basically get an associate PM who I trained up and whatnot. Um, and yeah, so I was looking for somebody who had like ideally an internship, but at least some experience building product. And the idea is to hire somebody with potential and train them up. And there will always be companies like that, and they're not going to pay you very much, but there'll always be companies that will like try to take advantage of goes back to being the fast learner, right? Like that that can look for somebody like that. So yeah, it's kind of a general answer, but like the summary is like I wouldn't dissuade people from trying to enter tech. I would just say be a little bit more flexible in sort of how you aim yourself and just make sure you're building product. One other piece of advice on this note too is just like really, if you can, try to do something with AI. And I actually this advice also goes for experienced professionals too. Like I think we're going to be in a world 10 years from now where like whether you like AI or not, or you're interested in it or not, and personally I find it super interesting and awesome, but like different opinions on it, right? But 10 years from now, the vast majority of product roles are going to be AI related. It's kind of like how we were talking about mobile 10 years ago. We were fortunate to be on the come up with mobile, but that's like what AI is right now. And 10 years from now, can you imagine like right now, for instance, can you imagine hiring a product person who like has only worked on websites and like hadn't worked on mobile? Like it'd be crazy, right? Like what have we been doing in the last 10 years? And I think that's what AI is going to be like 10 years from now. So it's also where the hiring is too. So if you built an AI product on the side, um, that's a competitive advantage where, like, frankly, like, I don't have that experience right now, right? So you can get a leg up of people who are even in the industry if you know something about AI that they don't.
Yeah, I actually was going to follow up on because you had mentioned it a little bit earlier, AI, which it's such a buzz thing right now, but it's also so real. It's kind of
Yeah,
like there's almost too much hype behind it, but also maybe not enough hype behind it because, like what you mentioned, and for people that aren't as familiar with what AI can do and how it can change what we do, is you mentioned going through all of those surveys, replying to everybody and it just
yeah,
taking forever and it's so tedious. And actually, another person we have on the show, I'm not sure if the episode will have released by the time we release this one or if it will be up and coming. It's a product founder that has a company called Fortel, which it has an AI that goes through and it literally interviews people. And then the coolest part about it is it sifts through all the data and
cool.
it then spits out like the insights that you're looking for. So that will just allow us to create better products faster, where there might not be an excuse to not go and user test things, or at least start getting a lot more qualitative feedback, because rather than it taking weeks or months and being very expensive, it can now take maybe a couple of hours between getting a survey set up, sending it out, and then letting the AI process the data. And it's
Yeah.
just like we'll be able to make better decisions. And I guess, how are you because I'm in the same boat. I have not worked on anything with AI, and I do think I agree with you. It's like a huge wave. But how are you, as someone who's already deep in your career, uh, not too deep, but like you definitely have a lot of experience? How do you now transition into a new technology that
Yeah.
is, frankly, it's new for both of us?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, frankly, I'm trying to figure it out too, right? But it's definitely forefront in my mind the last couple of months. Um, Look, ideally, you find a job where you can do it, right? That's the best case scenario, right?
Yeah.
If you find a job where you can do it, one, you're gonna be forced to spend a disproportionate amount of time thinking about it, but also, like, two, that will, like, shine through in the clearest way for the rest of your career too, that you have this experience. But barring that, like, the same advice applies that we were talking about for new grads as it does for experienced professionals. We should be doing something on the side, um, and we should be playing, like, at the very least, playing around with, like, Chat GPT and asking it questions and whatnot. Um, and at the very most, trying to build some sort of a small project. So I have a couple ideas I'm haven't made much traction on, but like, I want to poke around and, maybe they go nowhere. Who knows? Maybe they end up being gigantic startups, but more than likely it's a vehicle just to understand the technology. Um, that being said, like, ideally they do go somewhere because, uh, you know, having a product that exists on the internet or the app store or whatever the case may be, um, is always going to be a better way to show, like, showing your work is always better than, speaking about your work. Um, so yeah, I guess that'd be my advice. It feels kind of generic, but yeah, play around with it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And once you launch your AI projects that you're working on the side, I would love to do another like check, and you can come tell us about it, because I've even thought like I've mentor a few college kids or talk with a few college kids, and my thought is, I mean, they're lucky because they're getting in right now, even though it's not a
Yeah,
great market. Like, I am used to a certain type of salary and a certain type of
yeah,
lifestyle, and I'm not going to go take a nut. Like, when I first got into product, I was making like, well, when I very first, I was like making nothing, as like
yeah,
a co-founder. But then I got in, and I was like making like 90 grand, and it's
yeah,
like, okay, well, I don't really want to go back to work at an AI company just to like work from the ground up making
yeah,
90K. They can come in and they can beat experienced people out with a lower price point and this wanting to learn, where it's like, for you and I, like, we want to make
yeah,
salaries close to what we've been making, And then we also need to figure out how to get on a team that has, some AI happening, so we can build
Yeah.
out our portfolio there. So it's a unique advantage that you can kind of spin in a positive way, kind of at
Yeah.
any level. But
Yeah. Exactly right. So yeah, there's an advantage for the new grads and or people entering in that way.
yeah. I know we've kind of been chatting for a while. I appreciate your time. I wanted to kind of end, unless you have anything else you want to talk about, but any books or
Mm.
podcasts or anything
Yeah.
else that you recommend to like get started, get your beak wet.
Yeah. So these this is slightly a cop out because these two books are pretty famous and they're not really product specific. But I think paired together, they form a really nice contrast. And it goes back to what we were talking around leadership and building trust. I think consumed together, they they form they form a really important building block for how to approach building a high performing team around you. And those two books are How to Win Friends and Influence People and Radical Candor. And I think consumed together, there's like a nice, like healthy tension between the two. Um, and yeah, so I highly recommend all those to every new hire that I have. Um, but like, yeah, something we didn't talk about, like other sort of like highly generic advice, but important advice to build trust, you know, be like lavish with your praise. That's something that they talk about a lot in How to Win Friends and Influence People. Not in a like disingenuous way, but um, but when somebody does good work, like just tell them that they do good work, which is like not obvious to people. Some people like, I think a lot of people like, not the stereotype, but like, some men in raised in certain backgrounds, like they like, like only like sort of reserve your praise for like truly like outstanding like work so that it like means more. But I sort of fundamentally disagree with that. If you think something's cool, like just like say it. Um, and be specific about it. But then the radical candor I think is really important too. Like I think it's really important to be transparent. Radical candor basically says there's two things. Like there's these two axes of like care personally and challenge directly. And it's talking about it primarily in the context of managing people directly, but I think it can very easily be applied to the indirect type of influence and inspiration you need to do as a product manager. And I would say the more controversial part of that book is, like when you have more constructive criticism, things to say, like you shouldn't shy away from that because that challenge directly part is really important too. You just have to do it in a way that makes it clear that like, hey, you care about it. You're saying it because you care about the person. You want them to do their best work. And yeah, so I think both of those books are like were really like foundational for me. And I think that's the most important part of product management is how to like build an amazing team around you. The other stuff, I don't want to say anybody can learn, but you can read a bunch of you listen to a podcast to hear about product management if you want to learn specifically about product management.
Yeah, I love that. And you actually reminded me of one other thing I want to add to your list of 5 characteristics is feedback. Like the ability to receive feedback is huge for product managers because you're
Yeah.
getting feedback all the
Oh
time
yeah.
from developers. Like you have a meeting, hopefully every 2 weeks or every at least once a month called retrospective, where you're
Yeah.
going through and you're getting feedback, and it's not always. It's actually typically pretty brutal feedback. Like the developer culture is very direct. It's very
Yeah.
blunt, and a lot of that is like, hey, their life is usually a headache if something that you did, like if you didn't do your work good enough, or you didn't
Yeah.
respond to them quick enough, or you weren't, even if something wasn't like you're trying to wait on copy from the marketing team or whatever. It's like overall, it's a product manager's job to remove that blocker from the developer
Exactly.
even if they're waiting on another team, they have to figure it out. So amongst all of that is like that humility of being able to say like, you're not doing well here, you're not doing well here, and then be able to just have uh, that ability to take it in and not take it personally, but take it as like constructive criticism, which like that was a huge growth in my product careers. Like in the beginning, it like hurt bad. Like I remember I got like some early feedback and I had it like I couldn't focus the rest of the day. I had to sleep
Yeah,
on it and like it was like such a big deal. And then I was like, whatever, I'm gonna show them that I can do all that, da 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 da. And
yeah,
like it like transformed my career, but then I realized like, look, I'm getting feedback all the time, and sometimes it's
yeah,
and sometimes it may not feel accurate and whatever, but it's like that ability to just take it. I was like, I felt like that like boosts your career in a major way because then your team can see your growth and it continues to build on that trust.
yeah. Feedback is absolutely critical. You have to be able to take in constructive feedback and really embrace it and apply it and seek it out for that matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool, man. Hey, well, thank you so much. I'll definitely link those books, and I'm also going to link your other podcast down
Yeah,
below. Thank you so much for taking the time. I loved having this convo.
yeah. Likewise, Alan, and yeah, hope your listeners get really good value out of this too.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will.